Hey everyone, welcome to Aerobic AF. I'm Ken.
And I'm Quinlan. We're pumped you're here. This is your home for running, fitness, and all things hybrid training.
New episodes drop weekly wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
And don't forget to connect with us on our Instagram at aerobicafpod.
If you've ever crossed the finish line and thought, what the hell was that? This episode is for you. Welcome to Aerobic AF. Quinlan, you have the floor.
This episode is definitely for me. I had a pretty disappointing race over the weekend. I participated in my fourth solo pro HYROX event in Houston, and I went in not expecting a huge PB or breakthrough race, but I at least thought I'd be able to execute similar times that I had before.
You've basically been around a 106 in the pro solos.
Yeah.
That's been your time. You've done it
The last
basically
three races.
Your last three pro races, that's been around the time.
Yeah, so when I came out with a 109.55, which is basically 3 to 4 minutes slower, it really hit me.
That stings when you see that one on the results card.
It does sting, and we're going to get into more of a deep dive on that race specifically, but what this kind of brought up for us is how do you react and move forward when you have a disappointing race or something doesn't go your way, and what do you do after? Because it can put you in a very vulnerable state, honestly.
Right. And I think that every athlete at some point has this, and we certainly have both had this in more recent memory. Mm-hmm. But every once in a while, you get a race result that does not reflect where you feel your fitness is at, or doesn't reflect, not even just where you feel where it's at. It's just a bad reflection of your block, your training block, mm-hmm. just where you're at mentally entering the race. It's just a total flush-em result.
Yeah, it's almost like the law of averages, that not every race will be perfect. I think specifically in the marathon, I've heard people say that you have 5 good marathons in you, and that's it. But
something I got 5 more to look forward to then.
You do.
You might have exhausted 2 of those.
But I think what's interesting for me is that I actually don't typically get this disappointed after a result, because I feel like whether my limit was physical or mental, I gave it everything I had on the day. But I think for me in Houston, I just know that it wasn't everything in me, and that felt like it triggered more of an identity crisis of oh my God, have I lost my edge? Do I not have what it takes? Do I not know how to hurt in that same way and kind of sit in that discomfort? Was I shying away from pain? And so, we really want to dive into, what to do in these scenarios when you start having an existential crisis.
A couple of contrasts that I do want to mention before we dive into this topic. First and foremost is that we have another race coming up this upcoming weekend. Actually, we're going to be heading to HYROX Miami. We're both going to be competing in the pro doubles. So we'll discuss this a little bit deeper later, but I think the quick turnaround is actually a blessing in disguise for you. And there's a stark contrast between that and some of the bad races that I had, where then it was 3 months, and then the last one being HYROX Toronto, and between Toronto and Vancouver was a couple months, and then now between Vancouver and now was also about 3 or 4 months. So a pretty stark difference there in the quick turnaround versus the little bit of a gap between races, and there's a different way that you could kind of approach that. But ultimately, what we want to look at is how people should respond after a disappointing result. I think the initial thing that blows people out a little bit is the emotional aftermath. Immediately after the race, you can have a very visceral reaction of frustration, confusion. I mean, I remember after the HYROX Toronto, I was feeling so frustrated.
Yeah, I remember that one. And I mean, embarrassment too, honestly. It's the ego's bruised and you feel like damn, I was performing better in workouts all summer, or like, how did this happen?
It hurts. It hurts when you see
Yeah.
people also that you know or you feel that your fitness should be better on a day, and they're finishing in front of you. It's like and maybe you've been crushing workouts or all summer long or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're finishing behind them in the actual race. That can feel really devastating, and like you said, it can feel very embarrassing.
Yeah, it's tough. I know for me, after every race, I feel very euphoric almost regardless, because it is still a hard effort. And all the reflection happens kind of 24, 48 hours post. But like, even like after a marathon, I think you enter, or any big race for that matter, you can enter a state of like the post-race blues, where good or bad result, you can enter like a mini depression almost, because your body's recovering, your mind is recovering. So for you, like having a bad race, it compounds onto that already. And then the fact that you don't have an opportunity to redeem yourself in a few months, like it can take a toll for sure. But something that helps me or grounds me when stuff like this happens is realizing that it happens to everyone.
Yes. Every athlete at some point, and especially the more competitive you get, everyone's going to have this race that doesn't go well. I think what elite athletes actually do best is they separate themselves from the result. So even if it's not their day and the race doesn't go according to plan, they're able to look at the block, take the successes, take the failures, and just adjust accordingly without putting too much stock into maybe things just not going well on your day, because there are a ton of factors that can influence that. But it's the main thing is this one race doesn't define who you are as an athlete.
And that's just such a standard in all parts of life. Like, you are going to fail, and that's where you're going to learn the most if you let yourself learn. Like, I'll draw one parallel as I look at Taylor Swift. She has failed so many times, but you don't even know what her failures are, because it feels like all we do is watch her succeed, right? But it's not that simple, and it takes a lot of practice and just kind of staying relentless to your craft and perfecting it. But you can learn a lot from your failures. So I actually think that when it does happen, it's a blessing in disguise to really attack your next race or opportunity. And like, what I love about HYROX is that you do get to race a bit more frequently. It's not like you have one crack at it like the marathon. And obviously our race calendar didn't have anything else kind of between Vancouver and this Miami race. So that was an unfortunate thing for you, having to kind of wait through that period of time. But I've seen a lot of elite athletes in the last few weeks have 1 week a really disappointing result, and then they show up to another race the next week and crush it.
Or even have a disappointing result on the Thursday in the Elite 15 race, and then race again in the general field on Saturday and blow out their time by
that one is
3 or 4 minutes.
Really impressive. And yeah, it honestly kind of shows that sometimes you do just wake up on the wrong side of the bed. I feel like that partially happened to me on my Friday race. It just, I don't know, I did not have the gear that I needed to have, and it made it very difficult, not physically but mentally. So it sometimes is a fitness problem and sometimes it's a mental problem. I know there's a line that's like, oh, it's not all physical, it's actually more mental. And for the first time, I felt like I really understood what that meant, because even if you are physically prepared, if you are disengaged mentally, it doesn't even matter how fit you are. Like, okay, good luck.
This is a great takeaway, because I feel like that's exactly how I felt after the Toronto race. I just made a mistake early, and it really took me out of the game mentally. And I was fighting for my life for the entire rest of the race, basically from station 2 onward. And I was just so tapped out by the time I got to the end, just because I was exhausted, because mentally I just was never there after like the mistake early.
So how do you think you'll I guess, adjust next time? Like if you have another race and something happens early to throw you off, do you think you'll approach it differently after that experience?
Well, I think that I would avoid the execution error,
Well,
which in this particular circumstance was a penalty. But I do think that understanding that there are variables outside of your control, like I think if I were to get, for example, a bad sled lane, that independently by itself, I would be able to move through.
Great.
I think what was problematic for me in that race specifically was I kind of hit a couple of these. I took the penalty and then realized I took the penalty and then, got a difficult-ish sled push. Not like the worst one I've ever had, but I was like, this is a little harder than it should be. And then the sled pull was just a disaster. Like that was probably 2 minutes and 30 seconds, at least 2 minutes slower than it should have been for me. And that just really derailed everything. I think that, yeah, obviously mental fortitude is important. And I think that I would probably have the wherewithal to stay grounded now. Part of the reason I've been practicing a lot of mindfulness in that regard is to stay more present and not let any sort of negativity slip in and take a hold in that sort of environment. I think it's a practice that all athletes should definitely be more regular at, is practicing that mindfulness and that about grounding themselves during the hard efforts. But I think ultimately what I'm trying to say, I kind of ended up rambling a little bit here, is that I think that there are different reasons why races go wrong. And like one of the main reasons is execution errors. And that could be pacing, fueling strategies, which I've definitely learned a lot about, and just strategic errors. So just understanding that's not necessarily just the fitness, and there are a lot of other things that can go wrong, is another step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's actually really easy to blame fitness first. Like the first thing that comes to mind for me is like, oh my God, has my training not been good? Am I like actually losing strength and just not cut out for this race anymore? So once you get over that hurdle of acknowledging, okay, maybe it's fitness, but also maybe it's these other things that didn't go right, then you can actually learn from it and make an adjustment going forward. So like for me, I know wholeheartedly it was a mental situation. Like I was just not mentally engaged and didn't have that gear to really press and push forward. We'll kind of get into that again in our next episode, so I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, making sure you don't spiral and, stop trusting your training or stopping, pursuing your goals because of one race. You don't want that to define you. I think anyone who's had a lot of success in athletics would admit that it was not all pretty and not all wins to get to where they are. So yeah, the thing on like pacing and strategy, that one's interesting because I almost feel like to really perfect and execute a race well, you have to play around with some of those variables, and that might lead to you blowing up. So I do think sometimes you have to not fear failure if you want to really progress. And that might mean a couple of races that go really badly if you're really trying to figure out like your best way to do it.
Certainly. And I think it's an important point, is that when you're towing the line in these types of competitions and you are going to push, you are going to push the boundaries like that, you will either have a blow up or you'll have a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And you can't really tell which you're going to have in the moment, but unless you're really pushing the envelope there and seeing what you're capable of both mentally and physically, you won't accomplish that next level or pushing through and getting that new PB or that new PR. You are going to have to ride the lightning a little bit to figure out where that line is, and it can be really difficult to find. But it is important to understand that if you do want to continue to progress as an athlete, that sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice a race or two to figure out where that line is. Among the execution errors, there are also a bunch of other factors that I just want to rattle off quickly here. I mean, it could just be differences in a course. In HYROX, we talk about judging. You could get a particularly inept judge or a more strict judge that could definitely affect your mental game or affect the way that you're racing, the way you're being judged. And just conditions in the venues. We talk about venue humidity, or even some of these doors being outdoor, indoor, or even like we talk about in road racing all the time, there's no such thing as perfect conditions almost. It might be one out of every 20 races that you might actually get perfect conditions on a road racing course. So these are also things that will affect your ability or why things might go wrong or your ability to perform on a certain day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes things just don't come together. The race magic that we all hope for sometimes is there and sometimes it's not. So I've definitely started races where I've realized, okay, this is going to be a bit more of a grind than some of what I'm used to, but it doesn't mean it's all for nothing and you're super lost after that. You just have to approach it differently and make a different adjustment. So I do think it's a really big learning process and curve. As we said before, though, with the marathon, I think it can be a little more pressure to execute really well because you can't just do marathons every weekend. I think at most you could do 2 in a season, but even then it's a pretty quick turnaround to get back to training after a pretty serious beating on the body. So a really good way to practice your, race day fueling and just race week is to lean into the shorter distance races like 5K, 10K, HYROX, even a half marathon for that matter, because I do think at the point we're at right now, we are still learning about how to optimize our fueling, even like how you taper and how your body best responds. Some people need a pretty aggressive taper and to do almost nothing, whereas I know other people really like to keep their volume up. So those are also variables that you should acknowledge. Like maybe you were overtrained going into the race and you weren't as rested as you thought you'd feel waking up on race day. So lots of things to perfect here, but yeah, when it comes together, I mean, race day magic and having a good race is awesome, but I think what makes it feel even more awesome is when you've gone through some of these more difficult ones and learned from it and, sweat equity kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And if you know anybody who has had a bad race, or if you know friends, family, and they're trying to reset or figure out how to recover after that, and they need to, just a reminder that race results are just a snapshot, not the full picture, share this episode with them and send them our Instagram at aerobicafpod, because it is and can be really difficult. And I feel like especially when you're new into the athletic space, this can be one of the most difficult parts, is understanding that fitness does not equate to performance always on a single day, and that one bad result doesn't erase months of training.
Yeah, totally. And I think it just helps sharing and talking about different experiences. Like it's so easy to look at someone's Strava and think that they're just crushing it week after week, or
you mean those people aren't crushing it week after week? There are some people that have been up to some things lately that have been raising my eyebrows on that app.
mean, yeah, I think everyone's in the thick of training for their spring races. So
17 degrees today.
Yeah.
My goodness.
It's it's awesome. It's feeling like way more easy to get outside with this weather, but I think something that we forget is that performance is relative to the person. So even if you see someone, run a sub 3-hour marathon, maybe their goal was 250 or 245. Like it's easy to look at the result and think, oh my God, it's so easy for them. They just run so fast and perform so well. But it doesn't mean that they were, happy with it either. So I think it's just a reminder that just because someone is faster or like quote unquote better than you, it doesn't mean that they're not experiencing these things too. I think this is pretty universal, that it doesn't matter what your pacing is. Everyone has a bad day or a bad race, and you have no idea the context or the factors that led to that. So yeah, even just with your running friends or at run club, like talk to each other about it, share horror stories, and it'll definitely make you feel less alone. I think that's actually one of the ways that I bounce back from a difficult day, is knowing that I've had friends who've had like races that don't go their way, and then a few months later they have a huge PR. And when I look at them, I'm like, oh, of course they had a PR. They're super fit and awesome. And I'm like, okay, I need to transfer that thought to myself.
Channel that.
I'm like,
to yourself.
that could be me.
Okay, so this is an important point, is what to do next after you have this bad race. I think the initial part is something that we like to call the reset. Mm-hmm. So it's basically just decompressing, giving yourself that 24-hour to 48-hour window that you had said initially, to not overanalyze and just sit with the results. Don't overthink it. Just relax and just let it exist, because that first 48 hours is going to be where you're going to feel very emotionally attached to the result, and is really where the beginning of that spiral can start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a reset can look different for everyone. It could mean that you need to take a step back, and maybe you do need to take some time off or time away if you feel it's weighing on you really heavy. It might not be the best strategy for you to go sign up for another thing and, keep trying. But it also could be the opposite, where you feel like you still have a lot to give and your fitness is there and you do want to sign up for another race next week or in a few weeks. And that might help you also reset on, how your training is going and give you another opportunity to shine. So it is good, to take a beat and not react emotionally. I think we can all do that in our day-to-day lives in any situation.
I feel like a lot of the lessons that I've learned in fitness definitely apply to other areas of my life.
Don't send an angry email, or you write it out and you don't send it until you're in a clear head.
Or make sure that you're rereading your email and or job applications before you send them so that you don't print anything on there that you don't want to submit. You might not get the job.
Absolutely.
I think step 2 is an objective review. So you actually just want to be very specific about what went wrong in the race. This is not an emotional reaction. This is purely factual. So you have to separate the variables that are within your control from the variables that are outside of your control. And it's very important that you are being honest and just objective here.
Yeah, and something that I get stumped with here is that I really don't like excuses. I'm not a fan of blaming and excusing a result, but I do think there's a difference between saying, oh, I didn't run a good time because of XYZ. It's not about the time. I think it really pulling it back to, I didn't showcase my fitness the way I wanted to because of XYZ, but I take accountability for that too. And even though if it's weather, sure, that's pretty undisputable. No one is gonna fault you for not being able to control the weather. I think to an extent you can modify your plan based on the weather. So there is a level of control that you do have there, but I don't think it's healthy to get in the habit of always immediately having an excuse ready if you don't hit your, goal time, because you will not learn that way. I'll tell you that much.
No, and I'm with you to an extent. There is a difference between, I was having GI issues and I needed to use the bathroom and that's why I didn't get my time, versus
my fueling strategy was off.
Yeah, and taking accountability for that. Mm-hmm. For example, that was also, just for, this is actually a good segue, that was also something that I thought I struggled with in Toronto, was my fueling, because we were at the venue all day, was not optimized. Mm-hmm. And so I also started to run out of gas towards the end of the race. And I definitely thought I figured that out a little bit better for Vancouver, and I continue to learn from that. But you have to take accountability also that that's something that you need to figure out, is what works for you to make sure that you are ready to go by race time. And yeah. I've been pretty open about the fact that I do like racing in the morning. I would be happy if my heat started at 5 a.m. because I perform really well at those early mornings. And something that I struggle with as an athlete are the later start times for the men's pro in this division, because I never work out at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for me to get my energy systems up and running. It's hard for me to figure out the fueling strategy to make sure I have enough in the tank when I'm starting at that time. But that doesn't make me not accountable to figure that out, or an excuse because I know what the race time
Exactly.
is,
Yes.
and it's
not a
not
surprise.
gonna change. It's always between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock. My start time is always going to be there, and so
Yeah.
as an athlete, you need to figure out how you are going to manage that.
Exactly. So, yeah, figure out what exactly went wrong. Don't just rush to blame fitness and lack of physical ability. Sometimes it is fitness for sure, but oftentimes it's something else. And so,
It's a lot of the time. I find the it's not always fitness. This is kind of funny because I do think that also sometimes, and this is probably ourselves included, we can write a number or a time down on a piece of paper that we think that we're capable of as athletes that might be a little bit aggressive at times.
I mean, okay, yeah. I feel
That's an entirely different discussion in itself.
yeah, like I think that sometimes you don't fully know where your fitness is on race day because you're not really supposed to be proving that to yourself all the time in your training. So there might be a range that you think you're in, and you might hit it, you might exceed it, and you might not. And so, yeah, if your goal was too aggressive for your fitness, then definitely take a look in the mirror and be like, okay, why was I chasing a 35-minute 10K when I'm running, like I'm not even running those splits for my 5K, right? Like I think there is a reasonable target for a certain race, and that can be separate from your long-term goals in the sport. But the more you race and the more you train, the more you kind of know where you're at going into the race, and it really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. But yeah, I do think it's helpful to have like a couple minutes of a range where you think you might fall.
I think this is an interesting point because I think step 3 of kind of this review process is to adjust the way that you look at your goals. And I think that process goals are always going to be better for you than outcome related goals. This is one thing that I thought you actually did really well after your Miami race was you came away from it saying the result overall was disappointing, but here are some really great takeaways from this experience.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's like I got another race in the pro division under my belt. My station work on stations 1 and 8 was actually felt much better than it has. And these are great takeaways from a race that maybe otherwise would have felt bad if you're looking at the entire picture. But then chopping it up into chunks and finding parts to be positive about actually leaves a better taste in your mouth when you're leaving the venue.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, is that just because it was a disappointing result on paper doesn't mean it was all a wash. And so, yeah, maybe your fueling was really good that day and you felt really strong and energy levels were good. Like there is always something you can find if you look hard enough. So, whether you kind of meditate on it or journal or just talk it through with a friend, I think it's also really healthy to, find the good in a bad race.
So quick turnaround versus, or let's get this first actually. So you're going to get back to training after this race, usually generally pretty quickly. I think one thing, and I've been guilty of this for sure, is don't punish yourself with overtraining. Like I think the week after I had my bad race in Toronto, I think the next day I might have gone and done Everest or like a morning fitness class, like the morning
8 a.m.
after.
the next morning,
And it was
Ken was at the gym.
and it was unnecessary because I had just done this really hard workout the day before, but I was feeling just really terrible about my results. And granted, there were people who were doing full races Friday and then a full race again on Saturday. So I know that's a little bit different, but that was not the motivation for me. I was just feeling really badly about the result and just really wanted to go and have a hard workout and just prove that I still had that part inside me.
Yeah,
And it was the emptiest gym I've ever seen, I think, on the Saturday
race
morning
day
of
weekend.
the
Yeah, well, I think it's so natural to question and lose trust in your fitness and ability when you have a race that doesn't go according to plan and is really not aligned with your fitness. And so, yeah, like I was tempted and kind of did lean into running a bit faster on the run on Sunday, which was 2 days after the race, I felt like I really had to channel some energy and just kind of prove to myself that I could sit in a bit of discomfort and not shy away from it. So I do think on one hand, you might have to do what you got to do to get yourself back on the horse. But yeah, you don't want to be hammering it every day, training and feeling like you have to completely rewrite your training plan because you feel like you're not, fit enough or focused on the right things. Still having that trust in the process is really important here.
And I think the return to structure, as you had just alluded to there, is very important. You don't just want to be going out and just hammering again because you are emotionally depleted after this race and you need to prove it to yourself. Just get back.
That's a way to get injured.
That's right. Get right back on the programming and make sure that you don't lose too much motivation either. We always talk about or in the last episode we talked about knowing your why. Like, use that to ground yourself and get back into your flow and into your routine. And it will help kind of cleanse those feelings that you felt after the bad race and really just get back into that positive mindset and working towards, again, the next race, whatever that may be, or the next goal.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have another race or milestone to look forward to keep you accountable and structured with your training. If you do need to take a step back, absolutely do that. But I do think there's a lot of value in signing up for something else and just allowing yourself another opportunity to showcase what you can do, because the more you try, the more you're likely to succeed. It's a numbers game.
It is at the end of the day. This is an interesting segue because you were talking about how having another race on your schedule, this is one thing that I think is actually going to work really well in your favor in this situation, is that you basically get a shot at immediate redemption a week after this race that didn't go well, going into another HYROX Pro Doubles race. So I think that what can be really good about that is you don't have time to overthink that result, and it's not just going to sit there in the back of your head for forever. It's like you get immediate redemption where you can just flush that result and then hopefully leave with a positive feeling and a good taste in your mouth after another race in the same space, in the same area. I think the risk that you run sometimes is carrying a little bit of emotional baggage into the race, or is like some sort of trauma from the race prior. In this circumstance, though, I really feel like for you moving into a doubles, this is really a blessing in disguise, that you can just cleanse this from your system.
For sure. And I think it also lights a bit of a fire, too, when something doesn't go well. Like, I know exactly the adjustments I need to make, and I'm excited to put that into practice. And so getting to do that next week feels really good. But obviously not everyone has that luck on the race calendar. Like, I just happen to have these back to back. It can be difficult to, sometimes squeeze something in if it's sold out or it's like involves travel. So I think being mindful of your race calendar in general helps here, especially as you build up into like an A goal race, is giving yourself these opportunities and also knowing when you're going to have another shot at it and not just, leaving it into the abyss of months on end.
I think that's an important point. When there is a gap, I'd say the positive is that you do have a little bit of time to rebuild and improve. But the challenge, or at least the challenge for me when I had a bigger gap between those races, was, you sort of kind of start to doubt where you're at fitness-wise, or you can start to doubt that. And you can lose confidence without having that validation that a race can go well. Like having, two races that are about 2 months apart or 3 months apart, both go like badly twice in a row, and not having a chance to really showcase my fitness or where I felt like it was in either of them really left me feeling a little bit depleted and a little bit lost after the fact. And it was like,
tough to manage.
October, December, and now this is my first time getting another crack at it. And this one was actually kind of lucky that I got this opportunity to race. So I think that's a pretty big difference, and something that you have to balance for sure. If you don't have the opportunity to clear it right away, make sure that you're taking the time to rebuild in a way that's actually going to be positive for you, rather than getting sucked into that need for validation on the scorecard to show where your fitness is.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll pull it right back to the marathon because, again,
as we always do.
I love to do that because it's such an awesome race. But I've had a marathon go poorly, and then it took me about a month to recover physically, and then probably 6 months to actually recover mentally. I did end up running another marathon the following season, and I will say, like, it was one of the worst builds I've ever had. Well, what was
that? Startled me
very
so much.
Loud car outside.
There's a motorbike just revving it up at the stoplight.
I literally hate that sound. Okay, well, anyways, it was one of the worst builds because I was not recovered mentally from that race. And so, I mean, I muscled through. I had a much better performance in the fall. But yeah, I think being honest with yourself about what is best for you ultimately is there's no right or wrong way of how to do this. And I do think if you're marathon training and you're a marathoner that has, this race coming up in April or May, regardless of how it goes, I think there's a really great opportunity in the summer to race like 5Ks, 10Ks, and get a couple of other ones under your belt. So I'm mentioning this now because as we said, races do sell out, and you do need to kind of be on top of what your race calendar looks like. So being proactive about it and having another opportunity it can be really beneficial for your confidence. And it doesn't need to be the same race that you quote unquote failed in to get that confidence back.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I actually did have that opportunity in a race outside of HYROX. One of the things that really helped me after that race was doing the Toronto waterfront half.
Exactly.
And that was a race where I just went into it with the intention of obviously racing it like pretty aggressively, but I wanted to come away from that feeling good about the effort and with a pretty decent time. And I was able to do both those things. And it really did help reset the system after what was a very disappointing race at like the HYROX event.
Sometimes I actually feel like failure is a sign that you are going to succeed, because every single professional athlete and even just successful person in general has experienced a significant amount of failure.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like you're in really
key.
good company. And to be honest, I haven't had a race that has gone badly in years.
In a while.
In years.
I was thinking about the list of races. I was like, top 5. All right, that one was a top 12 out of 5,000 people. I was like, that's pretty good. And
it's yeah, there's been
she
a lot
did a
of wins.
podium there. She had outright win there. It was just like, oh my God. You've just been crushing it. So many of them.
Yeah, and like you can be riding that high and then all of a sudden you get stopped in your tracks, and I'm like, oh God, what is happening here?
That's a rude awakening.
It is, but I feel almost like it humanizes the situation of like, you know what? This is good. This is good for me. There's a lot that I can learn. There's a lot I can take away. And it almost makes me less afraid of failure now that I know that it can happen and I can move through it and I'm going to survive and everything will be okay. So I think that's something that I'll carry forward in racing. We kind of touched on this earlier, but sometimes you have to adjust your pacing and strategy. I'm really good at not blowing up. Like, we all have strengths. I'm very good at adjusting to not have that happen, but maybe this is an opportunity to put myself in a position where I might blow up in order to potentially have a breakthrough. And it's okay if the blow up happens, but I do think that you have to push yourself a little bit past what you're comfortable with in order to really perform well. Not always, but I think that's an important part of the puzzle. So that's one thing I'm taking away from this is just no longer a fear of failure.
Just one thing to kind of, I guess, make some of this more concise. Okay, so a couple things that we're saying. Do not change your program drastically after a bad race results, and do not chase weaknesses emotionally. Because I think that's something that everybody has tendency to do. I think what's more useful is sticking to your training plan that's been working and making small targeted adjustments for wherever you might have seen the deficiencies in your race. And HYROX, an example for that is like if you had a hard time in the sleds, maybe just do a little bit more of that specific training or add some strength. But you don't need to overhaul everything. Or if you, for example, maybe pace the race a little bit poorly, just try to integrate some more pacing workouts, some simulations maybe, or work at that pace more in your workouts to get used to what that feels like. And that's a good way to kind of mimic the racing stimulus and the way that you're going to feel. And the more comfortable you get in that in your training, the more comfortable you're going to be on race day.
Yeah, there's lots of ways that you can let this get to you negatively, and that is not going to be productive or lead you to success. So yeah, I think another really big thing here is to be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace. We are all human. We all fail. You have to fail to succeed. You are in very good company when you do fail. And I think it's where you learn the most, truthfully. Like, a great day is a great day. We all want them. We're all going to get them. But if you can actually be honest with yourself about why you're not performing the way you want to, that's where the money is.
Yeah, I agree. Stack the small wins. Sessions, stack the execution. And one race doesn't define your fitness. It's the execution that matters just as much as the fitness on any given day. So if you do have a bad race, just take the time to reset rather than reacting emotionally and tying yourself to the result. And you really just want to make sure whatever you're doing that you're avoiding that spiral.
Absolutely. Don't go to the dark place.
Well, go to the dark place during the race, but not
after.
Yeah, different dark places, I think.
You don't need to waste your time down there.
No.
That's not fun.
Positive vibes only.
Give yourself a time limit to how much you'll cry and then move on.
Oh, God. All right.
Hey, crying's a great release.
Yeah, can be for sure. Got anything else to add here?
No, but definitely excited to unpack the Houston race. For those interested, that's going to be our next HYROX Happy Hour episode. And so I think, it can be helpful when you kind of dissect the different aspects of a race and what went right, what went wrong. Maybe it'll help, prompt some ideas of you and your own race reflection, because it's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes you want to just wipe it from your memory and pretend it didn't happen, but we're gonna dive into the good, the bad, the ugly, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too. In the meantime, stay aerobic AF.